All right, recording. All right. Thank you everyone for coming to the Awake and Thriving podcast. Today we have with us Debbie Emick, right? Debbie Emick.
Yes.
And she's the author of The Other Side of Perfect, Discovering the Mind-Body Connection to Healing Chronic Illness. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here and grateful to have this conversation with you today.
Definitely. And I was reading your autobiography, and we have a lot of practitioners that we usually bring on the show to talk about going the holistic way to heal your body. But I've never actually had somebody on the show that went that route and did that journey to speak about. And I know that's what your journey has been. And I would love to hear kind of just where you started and what you went through to heal yourself.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, shortly after the birth of my youngest daughter, I started navigating the sort rough waters of discovering and being diagnosed with autoimmune diseases. And then took a long time to find like true sources of healing from that. So for sure, at first, it was a matter of having some positive markers on blood work and being referred to a rheumatologist. And at that time, the rheumatologist did more tests, but basically just threw a bunch of prescription medicine at me. So at one point, I was taking like 9 different prescription medications for various things about 3 times a day. And I was feeling, in retrospect, not surprisingly, but much worse than when I actually went to him to begin with. And so I mean, the first step was just empowering myself to find someone else, right? Realizing that there are a lot of doctors out there and it's okay to keep searching until you find the right fit.
Yeah.
And so after going to a new rheumatologist, new tests, I was eventually diagnosed with something called mixed connective tissue disease. So for me, it's an overlap of lupus and something called relapsing polychondritis, which attacks cartilage specifically. And for me, it had attacked the cartilage in my lungs. So there was severe collapse in my lungs when I would breathe out. And so that was the first most dramatic sort of diagnosis that I had that caused quite a bit of concern over my longevity and then what my quality of life might be like later as this might continue to progress. So at that point, I had a rheumatologist and a pulmonologist, but much better fits and matches. So my rheumatologist helped me work back to only taking medicines that supported my body and my immune system and helped it function clearly. Um, did plenty of tests to know that I didn't, at least at this point, need medical interventions based on the collapse in my lungs. As time went on, I was eventually diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension. Now, I'm not sure that that's an accurate diagnosis, but I do have a cardiologist for that because that's high blood pressure in the lungs that eventually, not very long of a period of time, causes heart failure. And so that's my traditional like medical team that I see. But there was a point where I just realized that there were some things I might be able to control and help myself with, that maybe doctors weren't recommending, but I felt okay about empowering myself to take those steps. So first was working on my diet. So eliminating foods that I didn't realize I was allergic to, and trying to add some nutrient density to what I ate. Um, and then I worked on exercise, right? So even though I was sick and tired and sore um, and thinking like, oh, maybe I just need to rest, I found that exercising actually was okay. It was beneficial for all of those things, and that was something I could do to help myself and control that as much as I could. I worked on eliminating like toxicities in my environment and the products I used. And eventually, after a conversation with my rheumatologist, I decided that stepping away from my work, at least for a period of time, might be helpful in seeing if eliminating stress would help me feel better and heal. And so I thought, like, that's the magic bullet, right? I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to magically get better. That's the only thing standing in my way. And what I found after that was, first of all, the stress was inside me and not necessarily outside of me, though my job was, I had been a classroom teacher for 14 years. So it was a bit stressful for sure. There were external stressors that added to that. But I was learning that my internal processes of dealing with stress were not benefiting my system. And second, though I thought this was going to solve all my problems, it wasn't until after I left my job that I found myself in like my deepest, darkest place. So now I had done all of this stuff to try to heal. I had done everything I knew, and I was still in pain, still feeling sick. And now, also just emotionally in a very low place. And so on the other side of that, I was able to recognize it and realize I never wanted to go back there. So each step forward was really just a way for me to not get back in that deep, dark place, like a hopelessness. And for me, that meant moving forward with my mental, emotional health to sort of break cycles, hopefully for my daughters. And so that was my first mission, like I don't want to pass this on to them. I don't want to create new cycles I'm unaware of. And the more I worked on my mental, emotional health, the more I found physical pain actually leaving my body. And so that just sort of propelled that mission, that the mind and the body are connected, but my body was physically showing symptoms that my mental and emotional health uh, were expressing through that. And so I continued to learn and grow and move toward that kind of healing, and found physical healing from that as well.
Hmm. And when you eliminated some foods from your diet because of allergies, how did you figure that out? Was it just like you going through foods, or you just innately kind of knew, you're like, my stomach gets upset for this, or
Mm.
how did you figure that out?
Well, at first I went to someone that suggested it, like an acupuncturist,
Okay.
and she suggested an elimination diet. And I was super surprised to learn that cheese and wheat, two things I really loved, did cause problems for me. So when I at first eliminated those, this eczema that I was having trouble with went away. So
Mm.
that was like my first hunch, like, oh, okay. I was shocked because I ate those so often, and I eliminated them, and I found some healing from it. And so then I went a traditional allergist approach. So I
Mm.
went to an allergist and found a wheat allergy. And then I just kept experimenting with elimination, adding back in. And eventually I did some like delayed allergy tests with a naturopath. So like a IgG allergy test that measures your delayed response within 72 hours, and found some other things that caused some issues for me
Okay.
there. So that's kind of how I found out about allergies or intolerances or things that don't make me feel good.
Okay. And when you were seeing the rheumatologist and the pulmonologist, did they just recommend you prescription medications, or were there supplements, or what were their recommendations mostly?
Yeah, they did not really recommend supplements. When I started seeking out and finding supplements, I kind of had to do my own research, figure that out on my own. Again, trial and error, and then help of a naturopath. She calls herself a chiropractor in my area. So so she kind of helped me with that. But that was largely my own work. My rheumatologist, who was, overseeing the majority of my care, cautioned me about trying holistic things, kind of like from a loving place for sure. Like, you could end up spending a lot of money. People are going to come to you like trying to get you to try this or buy this. And she said, put your wallet away. just let's work on this here. And so when I started trying more natural things, I didn't really talk to her about that because I didn't feel like she was receptive to it really.
Yeah, definitely. I find that on both things of the spectrum is you're going to find great Western medicine doctors and you're going to find horrible ones. I've worked with horrible ones and
Yeah.
unethical ones. So I know they're out there. But
Yeah.
then on the holistic side, yeah, there's going to be great ones and there's not going to be great ones. But that's
Yeah.
kind of life. Like every profession is going to have their good and bad. So
Yeah.
it's kind of sad that you would just blanket a whole profession. You're like, all these people are horrible.
Yeah.
They're really, not all of them are that way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think she really was coming from a loving place and trying to care for me. I have a different rheumatologist now, and I think things are sort of slowly coming around, but
Yeah.
um I empathize with her and her training and her beliefs, but I still at the same time felt like it's going to be okay if I try some things and
Yeah, definitely. And what kind of holistic practitioners did you try? Because I see the Western and rheumatology, pulmonologist, you saw an allergist, you saw an acupuncturist, and like a chiro naturopath. Is that correct?
yeah. Yeah, so the a naturopath to kind of help me with my food and refining like what my body did with that. Tons of reading and just trial and error. I have to say, like, that was a big chunk of it. I went to the chiropractor. I live in a really rural area where chiropractor is an accessible term. She definitely does chiropractic, but
Yeah.
she does a lot of other holistic work. And
Yeah.
with me, she did some somatic, like, and I didn't know at the time, but she did some somatic work that helped me really see that mind body connection. And
Mhm.
then I was super skeptical at first, but over time, some physical pain, so literal physical pain in my shoulders that I had tried so many things, could not get to go away, and pain in my thighs started to lessen over time and eventually went away. And so she was working on healing my gut with me at the same time and doing some more of work with supplements and that kind of stuff. But now I know it's all related, right? Like I can't heal my gut if my nervous system is in a certain place.
Yeah.
It's still in fight or flight mode. My gut's not going to experience any healing. So, so yeah, that's what I would. I think you summarized it pretty well, but I would define my chiropractor maybe a little different than she defines herself here where I live. But
But it kind of makes sense that she would give people a term that they identify with a little bit more
mhm,
and are more comfortable with than calling yourself, like, say, for instance, an Ayurvedic practitioner. A
yeah,
lot of people, that's still really new on the coast cities right now. Most
yeah.
people are still like meh about going to that. So her calling herself something like that they're not familiar with, I can see how she probably wouldn't see anybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Wise choice on her part. But she definitely has a broad range of things that she does. She also so back at the very beginning in my major skeptical moment, she did some work, some energy work with my chakras,
Yeah.
and I was just completely humoring her, to be honest. Like, this is crazy. But again, there were like physical uh even as a skeptic and thinking this isn't going to do anything, I'm just doing this to say I tried everything. There were physical benefits for sure. And so just realizing that, I mean, energy is real, right? But finally realizing that energetic connection and that mental emotional connection and having some legitimacy toward it,
Yeah.
um, just allowed me to keep moving forward in that way and find healing that I couldn't find from all of the other things that I was doing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I find like the energy healing is probably the most, um, yeah, people will probably like, you'll be entertained. You're like, okay, I'll let you do this, but I don't
Yeah.
really believe it until they actually get some kind of benefit from them. So I've definitely hired people in the past to do that. And initially, like, I was like, okay, energy, whatever. But as the years have gone on, there's a certain woman that I actually hire when there's like, say, like my son or my daughter or somebody in my family's going through something, and I'll
Mm.
hire her. And she's not like ridiculously expensive. Actually, for what she does, she's like dirt cheap. Like, I'm actually really surprised. But she'll do it. It's like kind of called Reiki energy. Have you ever heard of that? It's kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
she does that for like a week for them. And usually what will happen is I don't even tell them that I did that, but they'll start having positive effects. Like the situations will be turning around within that week. And it's happened every
Wow.
single time. And so ever since then, I'm like, I think like even because is it placebo for me? Like, I
Mhm.
don't think so because it actually helps them. Like, and
Yeah.
they're not even like really close to me, not close to me, like they're not close to me in proximity.
Uh-huh.
But since the energy moves the way it does, it always helps them.
That's fascinating. I would love, yeah, access or at least try something like that, learn
Yeah.
more about it.
I can send you the link to her. When I send it to you, you're going to be like, you're going to look at it like I did. I'm like, oh, but it's not that expensive. And
Yeah.
I've done it like 3 or 4 times now. And every single time there's like a shift, like a situation that wasn't going well, like people weren't feeling well. They were feeling like anxiety or a little bit depressed.
Mhm.
Like that little kick would turn the situation around. It was the oddest. It's the
That's amazing. And because you mentioned this, I've learned to be totally okay with placebo effect, right? I mean, there's so many studies out there that placebo effect is almost as effective or more effective than a lot of these toxic medications I was taking for so long. And so it's like, if I pay some money to get a placebo effect, I'm actually fine with that,
yeah,
because I've paid money to get medicines that made me feel worse.
yeah.
So it's so yeah, I think the placebo effect is kind of cool, but I understand what you're saying, this
Yeah.
would be good to try. I'd love to
Yeah,
learn
I'll
more
send
about
you
that.
that because you'll see her and she responds so quickly and it just starts happening right away. So I actually am
Nice.
having her do that right now for me. And
Oh,
it's not really
wow.
for it's because what happens is you purchase something for like a week and for a little bit more, like Debbie, like for a little bit more, you're gonna be shocked by how little. She'll like add you on because you're the purchaser. And so I'm doing that right now for my son,
Ah,
and so I'm on there right now as well. So just as like an add-on. So
well, cool.
but
That
you'll see that.
that sounds
Um,
exciting.
so right now, who are you seeing? Like, who do you see for? Or do you still have your autoimmune? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so I see my specialists on a fairly regular basis. My lungs are stable, so I don't have to see my pulmonologist unless I have issues or, it's very far spread out.
Yeah.
So I see my rheumatologist and cardiologist on a fairly regular basis.
Okay.
And I still take a couple of prescription meds that help control my immune system, help it be a little bit healthier. Um,
Mm.
and I just have a regular practice and routine that helps me um, be in a good place mentally, emotionally, and have calm my nervous system so that
Mm.
I can sort of live my best life, my best days. So I have a regular practice of um, meditation
Mhm.
and exercise, but using exercise in a loving way or as like an active meditation, more intuitive, um, and journaling and using food again in a loving, like fulfilling way rather than over controlling, trying to over control it,
Mhm.
getting plenty of rest, and then doing some other like self care practices um, to help support my body. Like my favorite is just a nice hot long bath. Um, and so I don't really find the need to see holistic practitioners on a regular basis anymore, but I know, I can go back if I start to have some more trouble or issues or feel something coming up. Um, but mostly I'm able to support myself at this point with that regular routine and taking care of myself. And then if needed, I would definitely go back to my chiropractor or another naturopath if I started having new symptoms or something come back up.
And what are you taking any supplements right now? Are there any kind of vitamins that you're taking?
Yeah, so I would say I went like hardcore on vitamins and supplements, and I've learned to whittle those down.
Mhm.
Um, what I know digestively that I need is magnesium. So I
Oh,
take magnesium every day. I use calm powder, so I'm not like saying,
yeah.
but so I use calm powder for that, and I take a probiotic every day. I
Mhm.
take a vitamin D supplement with some K in it, or like some oil, some fats in it. And I take a digestive enzyme with each meal, which really helps. Those are the things I know for sure that I need. When I've tried to eliminate those, things start to not work right properly again. So I keep those. I also do like um I try to do healthy fats as much as I can. So in one of my cups of tea a day, I'll usually put uh some coconut oil or a healthy fat, and then I will use some collagen peptides. Um, and so I think that really helps support my healthy system. I notice when I don't take collagen peptides. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at with as far as vitamins and supplements go.
Okay. The vitamin D I take as well. I take collagen. I take some enzymes as well. The vitamin D, I noticed initially when I first took it, it had an effect on me, and I wasn't anticipating that occurring. Like there was like a subtle mood shift or a uplift of my mood, and so I take a mega dose once a week. But
Mm.
I can tell when I don't take it. Like I need to take vitamin D.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to know what kind you take. I take one, I take it every day. It's a larger dose than probably a doctor would recommend, or
Yeah.
is recommended. And that was my initial hope with it, because I was feeling so low.
Yeah.
I started adding vitamin D in the winter, and now I just take it year round. And yeah, I was definitely hoping for the emotional benefit, as well as, now with everything going on, we know it has an impact on our immune system, and so hopefully that's a positive one as well.
Yeah, and I hope more people start to take that. Like, I really do. I think a lot of people need that more than they realize. Unfortunately, they don't realize that until they're not in a good situation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I do hope people continue or start to take that. I finally twisted my best friend's arm and to start taking it. So,
Oh, wow.
and I'm really, but
Hopefully.
you know what actually twisted her arm? What's going on in the country? So I kept on
Oh,
telling her, I'm like, you need to take this. You need to take this because she has asthma. So she's not like, she has some things going on as well. It's like, you need to start taking some supplements and like taking better care of yourself so this doesn't hit you really hard. So
right. Yeah, hopefully that does help for sure.
yeah, she had two people sick in her house though this week. So sick with
Mm.
what's going on. So, but she didn't get sick, and neither did her son.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. She was
Interesting.
really upset and scared about all of it, but they got quarantined into their bedrooms. And actually, her daughter's still not allowed out of her bedroom because she just is getting over it.
Mm.
But we'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best for them.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully
All
so.
right. So let's see. What is there anything I didn't ask that I should ask that most people ask that I didn't know?
Oh, no. Uh, I think that if I am speaking to someone in my place years back, right? What I
Mhm.
wish had been put in my path long ago was the works of like Gabor Mate and The Body Says No,
Mhm.
and Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score. So
Mm.
um, there's just as much evidence and research out there to this mind body connection as there is for these other just like supplements or exercise or diet. There's a lot of good research out there that this makes a difference, and so reading the works of those doctors, um, it was really helpful and beneficial. And I think if more doctors were able to also at least ask about the mental health of their patients,
Yeah.
refer to also, a mental health professional, I think that would help get that ball rolling. I also want to add that my cardiologist, was a little different than these other practitioners I went to. The first time I went to him, he was definitely in a rush, like had to get in, get out. He had a spiel that he goes through, but this was later in my healing for sure when I was like, I don't want more medicines. I don't want more diagnosis. Like that's not where I'm at. And he said, I have a prescription for you. And he got a piece of paper. And I was like, oh, not another prescription. But he instead wrote this list, right? So number one, he wrote diet and he recommends a plant-based vegan diet. And whether someone follows that or not, it was at first intriguing to me because it was like he was the only doctor that recommended changing my diet that I had been to. And so then the second thing he wrote was exercise. And so he recommends 30 minutes of like getting your heart rate up a day. And I find that a lot of people that have autoimmune disease or chronic illness think they can't exercise. And I had never once been told not to. It really supports the body if you can do it in a healthy way that doesn't leave you feeling worse. But then the last two things he wrote, third, he wrote mental emotional health. And I had been working through this somewhat, so that felt good. But he looked me in the eye and he said, I don't just mean do like yoga or meditate. I mean, find your rug, pick up the rug, and sweep everything out from under the rug. And I remember kind of tearing up then because it was just so different from what anyone else had told me. And the last thing he wrote was connection. And so, just like there's a lot of research about repressed trauma, repressed emotions, not dealing with that, some certain personality styles, there's tons of research about people who lack connection in their life and their physical health later, their longevity. And so, for me, truly healing meant becoming really real about who I was, right? So I had sort of lived under this cloak of perfectionism and people pleasing. And to heal, I had to peel back all those layers and become real and authentic, and only through that was I able to find true connection, that wasn't based on this perfectionism or this people pleasing. And so yeah, I think that's important to say that there are people out there that are doing this research themselves. He's a doctor that's, you know, always reading and learning and recommending these things, recommending holistic things, has told me you can heal your heart,
Is
so
he
there
younger
are,
or is he older?
yeah, he's probably about my age. I would say he's probably 40-ish, around 40s.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's amazing. I love those are the type of physicians that I actually want to talk to
Right.
from the
Yeah.
Western medicine side because they're trying to bridge it over. Just like there's
Mhm.
holistic ones that are trying to bridge over as well. Like if after all this we can exchange some information, like I'd love to just get his
Sure.
perspective on Western medicine because that in itself, giving a patient that kind of list,
Mhm.
wow, that's so hard to believe, to be honest, just
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
cardiologist.
It was amazing, and I know, like, my hunch is from his perspective, it's because he reads the research that's out there, right? So
Yeah,
there's so much evidence for a vegan plant-based diet because it's been around for so long.
yeah,
Uh, there's tons of evidence about connection. There's tons of evidence about
yeah.
mental emotional health. It's just not what we typically hear about when we go to the doctor. It's not what they're typically trained for. So,
Yeah, because they're not. And if you look at their course studies, they're not trained for that. Only right
mhm.
now, like the ones that are in school right now, they're actually getting like a little bit more information than they've ever had. And
Mm,
so they're more open to the holistic side. But I've talked to PCPs or primary care physicians,
right.
and I was looking for a functional medicine doctor. And my primary care, he was probably like 60s, he had no idea what a functional medicine doctor was. Like I was asking him, he's like, he just couldn't fathom what it was.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. So
so
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, as humans live inside our little world unless we decide to go out and search for
yeah,
sure. So,
definitely.
mhm.
So, but we'll see what happens with that. I think the medical field in itself is changing, because there's a whole nother sector that's really coming in and showing to be useful, and
Mhm.
both sides are seeing what they can provide and what the other ones can't provide. Because, like I've always said, and I've talked to all the other practitioners about, if you need heart surgery, if you are in a car accident, you break your leg, Western medicine is where you need to go. But if you are kind of like, well, and you just want to make yourself better, like you go to holistic side, like that's where you go. Like if you go to a
Mhm.
doctor and there's nothing wrong with your blood work or anything, they can't give you, I mean, they could probably prescribe you a drug if there's like an unethical doctor, but for the
Mhm.
most part, they can't diagnose you with anything. If anything, they'll diagnose you as being a hypochondriac.
Yeah.
But
Which
it's,
doesn't help, right? I mean, that happens to so many people going to a doctor looking for legitimacy, thinking a diagnosis will either make them better or make them feel less crazy or make it okay, just that they're feeling the way they are. And I just think that we seek that, not realizing that that external thing won't lead to health really in the long run.
no,
Um, and so, yeah, whether you have a diagnosis or not doesn't really matter. If you're feeling sick and tired or burned out or like something's wrong,
yeah.
then you're feeling that, right? And so, yeah, you go where you need to go to get the help that you need for
Yeah.
sure.
And even if it's not, because some of the people that I would go see initially before because I was in the Western medicine world, I
Mhm.
wouldn't tell my colleagues about that because it was very odd to them as well. Like it was like almost like a circus trick. Like they're like, aha, you see an acupuncturist, like, but it's just like on your to-do list, like in your lifetime, not like it's something that could be helpful. And that's how a
Right.
lot of the things were taken as. So,
Mhm.
but, so I'm going to ask you some fun questions. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
All right. So, what is your favorite food to eat?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, right now I'm really loving smoothie bowls. So like a peanut butter chocolate smoothie bowl
Ooh,
is and then like sorry, my
it's okay.
microphone took a dive. So the idea like eating it with a spoon, with some things you have to chew on top of it helps with digestion, but also just makes it fun and feel kind of ice creamy. That's what comes to mind first right now.
Okay. I love the smoothie I make. I freeze bananas and then I do peanut butter, chocolate, and banana. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's like ice cream.
Yes, exactly. Basically, it's that with some like nut milk and
Yeah.
some like grain-free granola and a sliced banana and some coconut on top and maybe some
Yes.
cocoa nibs. Yeah. So
You're making kind
very
of
good.
like I always chop up this name, but it's a acai bowl.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's like that, but it's like chocolate ice cream flavored instead. So super
That's
yummy.
great.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. And then the books you recommended, I noticed we talked about them before. You recommended doctors or books, or what books were you recommending to read?
The Body Keeps the Score is Bessel van der Kolk. When the Body Says No is Gabor Mate. So any of their work, I think, is great for more on the mind body connection.
Okay.
Um, and then there was a book as I started journaling
Mhm.
called Expressive Writing, and it's about journaling to heal. That was very helpful. And then I would say, like, in letting go of shame and discovering that I had this perfectionist, people pleasing tendencies, I did a lot of like reading and listening to Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle. So those two authors and speakers for
Okay.
sure were helpful in sort of shedding some emotional stuff
Okay.
that I had been holding on to.
I'll make sure and I'll put those in the show notes just because I'm a bookworm. Like I have tons of books. Me and my boyfriend put together, we have way too many books. books. So, but I'll look into those. I usually try to get at least one book from each person that I interview to kind of just see those different perspectives. Because since you're on the podcast, our perspectives are similar. They're different, but they're similar enough that I usually enjoy most of the books that I read. So
Cool. Yeah. It's how I primarily learn. I listen and I read a lot and it's super helpful. So
beautiful.
definitely.
All right. I feel like there was like another question I wanted to ask you. Let's see. Oh, so this one played in like it really rung true for me, like thinking you're going to leave work and you're going to be stress free. But you said that you encountered that the stress was inside of you. And so you had to work on yourself internally in order to release that stress, correct?
Yeah, so that's part of it, definitely, like releasing those repressed emotions or the trauma, actually dealing with it and letting it go, right? So what happens when we think we're just like forgetting something and moving on or not talking about it, it's almost like we're holding it closer and tighter, right? I was hiding it away. I didn't trust anyone enough to talk to them about it or be open about it. And so that's part of it that creates this uh, just faulty nervous system, just like a constant sense of fight or flight, which has very long term, like in the long term, very negative hormonal, chemical responses in your body that causes chronic
Yeah.
illnesses or problems.
Yeah,
The other
definitely.
yeah, the other was just thinking that like all of my stress was because I worked this stressful job, which isn't actually true. I mean, like there were, like I said, stressors, like external stimulus that were stressors. And so eliminating those external stressors can be helpful. But what was more than that was that it was my way of dealing with the stress, right? So I left my job and then I found all sorts of stuff to stress out about. So I removed the external stimulus, but then I just found more to keep supporting that. And
Yeah.
part of it is like, um, when we're stressed, we have more adrenaline. We feel like we have more energy. It's creating energy for us. And so it's almost like this addictive nature to stress that's can be unconscious. And part of it was just like that was what I was used to. So I brought that back in. And so until I really dealt with my own internal response to stress, it didn't matter how much stress I eliminated because I would just find something else to be stressed out about. Does that make sense?
It does. You wanted to like fill in that hole. You're like, oh, there's a hole. Like I need to fill that one in. And
Uh-huh.
it ends up being with stress. And I know for me, I think it was just dealing the way you deal with situations is usually there's a pattern, then there's a habit to it. So even though the job went away, like you said, you still had those coping skills or the way you approach situations. So you were still going after those situations that way.
Mhm.
And until you change those, you're still dealing with, you know, all kinds of stuff, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. Because I know for me, that's what occurred as well. And it's the way I approached situations. Like it was almost like control. I was like, I need to make sure that this is perfect. But it
Mhm.
kind of rings true because when I worked in the Western medicine, like I had to control all facets of it. There wasn't like a margin for error. You had to be in control. But then, so that was really stressful, right? But then coming out of that situation, I was still applying those ways to my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't really need to control it that much.
Yeah.
So having been able to let go of that has been really, really helpful, or just finding a new way to approach those situations.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I have a really patient boyfriend who's like, we're just going to calm down this weekend. We're just going to relax. And that helps me because I'm like, okay, yeah, I can just like relax. Like the world's not going to fall apart if I'm not like trying to be the puppeteer.
Yeah. No, that's really important. The people that are in your life, if they support that
Yeah.
or not, makes a big difference, right? There's also these unconscious things with our ego that like uh we get a lot for our ego by working a job that feels important to us and that we get good external feedback about how we're doing with our job.
Yeah.
And when we take that away, then we're still looking for ways to support our ego, right? So
Yeah.
like in our society, it's like being busy is
Yeah.
really important, right?
Mhm.
Having an important job or being really smart or good at it is really important. So removing a job can be a lot harder than you might think it is. You're removing those supports to your ego. And so it's kind of like, oh, finding ways to keep building up my ego, like being busy and doing important things and being an important person for sure.
Yeah, it's removing a part of your identity
Mhm.
and taking that job off my plate was a part of my identity, you, even though the work environment wasn't the greatest, and that was contributing factors. So you would work so hard and like kill yourself and
Yeah.
do ridiculous shifts, but you weren't ever given the acknowledgement that you're actually doing well from your up higher ups. You were only
Oh.
given that through like the people under you or your peers.
Mm.
So it was just a really hard environment, but that was a part of your identity. Like most people's jobs is a part of their identity.
Yeah.
And to come out of that, you have to kind of find your new identity. And it can be jarring for a lot of people. I know for me, it felt like my legs were in the air and I was just swimming. I was like trying to find something to like land on.
Mhm.
Luckily
Yeah.
I did, but that's a big shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when we don't know what we want to land on, we land on a lot of things that might not be the right thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's more about detaching too. Like, I am not my job. I am not my diagnosis. I am not my pain. I am not, but becoming aware of those stories or thought patterns that
Yeah.
cause me to identify with certain things or think certain things are important or necessary, and then just detaching from those. Um, yeah, so my purpose really isn't my job. I can take my purpose with me anywhere I go in any job I do, ideally, right?
Yeah.
So learning to detach from that sense of identity for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Debbie, I feel like we covered like a lot of stuff. This has been like a really interesting conversation.
Oh, good. I've
So,
really enjoyed it. Thank you. It's been nice to
yes.
chat.
So, um, thank you so much for being on the show. It was lovely to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it too.
Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and end. Wait, no, let's press.